Spider Lady had just slurped the last little ray of light from the two trees and scampered away into the darkness. Everyone was super pissed. Feanor was so dark and spooky. No one was having fun anymore. The two Valor babes, Giovanna and Nina, took some fruit from the dead trees. They told Man that the trees could be restored if they borrowed some of that precious light from Feanor's Silmarils. Man gathered some big dick energy and asked politely, "Yo, Feanor, it would be pretty swag of you if you could lend us your Silmarils to restore light to the world. Please, dude. It's so spooky out here, let us borrow your fancy little nightlights." Feanor, "No way, Jose. The Silmarils are mine." The audacity of even asking. "You Valor are just like my dad. Pretty uncool, dude." Later that day, Melka, the meanest meanie ever, killed Feanor's dad, jacked the Silmarils from Feanor's vault, and dipped back to his castle called Angband. Feanor was so angry that his fancy rocks got stolen. That was literally the only reason he was mad. He gathered up some of his Noldor friends, and left Feanor to hunt for Melka and get his rocks back. Feanor and his angry dudes arrived at the ports of Orqueland. They met the local residents and asked them super nicely if they could borrow their boats. JK. They were complete assholes about it. A Teleri elf questioned Feanor, "What's the meaning of this? What are you and this army doing here?" Feanor replied, "The big bad man took my sparkly rocks, so I'm going to go murder his ass. Give us your boats or I'll give you the old stabby stabby." The Teleri elf told Feanor to shove his Silmarils where the sun don't shine. That was particularly triggering to Feanor, because if he did stick the Silmarils up his ass, he could have saved them from Melka. He was so angry. Feanor turned to his army and said, "Yo, these Teleri elves said some pretty mean things about your mothers. Let's kill them and take their boats."
I just want you guys to know that actually that like intro went on longer with all of like more like the song if you've seen meme compilations before, but you know, copyright and everything. Hello everyone, I am Lady Balefire and welcome to week 2 of our Silmarillion read along and book club. And I'm so excited to be here today because we have Feanor and everything's working. We have Manetheren and Gadfly. Yay! And I am, you know, I always threaten to do a bikini stream, but I am wearing this in honor of the Teleri, our wonderful sea elves. And I love the beach, and I just feel for them. And we're gonna have a lot of Feanor did nothing wrong vibes.
We're gonna get into this. Yeah. Yes.
Oh my God! So how are you guys doing?
Living the dream.
Living the dream.
All I gotta say is FLM. Feanor's life matters.
Yes. Hashtag justice for Feanor.
I do. I have a lot of feelings about this, and it kind of goes back to me thinking about the elves in Lord of the Rings, and when like the Fellowship meets Fingolfin, and he's like, "Hey, can you help me?" And he's like, you know, like, "I don't care. I've killed Balrogs, whatever. You guys can handle this." And I'm just like, you guys are like, your life essence is tied to the existence of Arda. And these men who have like these little effervescent lives and very short-lived souls, they don't even know what happens to them. They're willing to put it all on the line, but you're like, "Nah, dude, like, do it." And here's an existential threat, and you're just like, ugh. Anyway, we have a lot to cover today, and the chapters that we're going to do are of the beginning of days to chapter 9, which is what is it? Sundering of the Noldor.
It should be the flight of the Noldor, I believe.
The flight of the Noldor. So, before we begin, I know you weren't with us last time we did this, Feanor. Did you have any thoughts about the stuff that we covered last week?
Oh, yeah. So the creation stuff, yes. Real quick, let me grab my copy of the Silmarillion because I have. Let's see here. Where did I put my notes at? I thought I was prepared, guys. I apologize.
No, you're a good company.
You know what? If I remember or find it later, I'll mention it. But let's just go ahead and get this started.
Yeah, I think what you told me before, like after the stream, was that you were just saying this was a war of attrition, and I think you were absolutely
That's what it
right,
is.
and that we
Yeah.
really start getting that feeling like in these next chapters, because the first chapter is of the beginning of days, and right off it starts with like it's told among the wise that the first war began before Arda was fully shaped, and ere yet there was anything that grew or walked upon the earth, and that's totally true because we can already see like when Iluvatar makes Melikor, he's already like wondering like how can I learn more? How can I like make myself higher than everyone else? So I think that's right. And the first chapter is some more of the creation stuff and the beginning of the days, and it talks about the spring of Arda. I think it's really interesting that they kind of go with the like this seasonal like progression of years and stuff like that. And it talks about the founding of Valinor, which I think is kind of interesting. Yeah, I was going to see if there's anything I wanted to say. Oh, yeah. So the Valar create Valinor as a paradise that's supposed to be free from Melkor, but like, he's still out in the world, so he exists. And they do talk about the two trees there. There's one was silver and one was gold, and there were Teliperion and Laurelin. Now, I thought the two trees was really interesting. Like, and I thought maybe Gadfly, with your mythological and classical background, you had thoughts on that.
Well, there's a lot of tree symbolism in mythology, but these two in particular, it's not necessarily the trees themselves; it's the light of the trees that's the particularly significant thing. And so light always has this sort of connotations with knowledge and understanding and hope and good, right?
Yeah.
So those two trees, they constantly alter which one is on and which one is off, right? So
yeah, that is interesting.
Period, knowledge and hope and life and light and good are constantly present, right? And so you can tie it to the idea of Yggdrasil, as brothers Arda point out there.
Yeah, definitely.
But there are some significant differences, right? Because Yggdrasil is supposed to be the tree that the world is kind of on, right? Yggdrasil is less the tree in the world and more so the eschatological beginnings of everything, because all the different realms of Norse mythology are on part of
the tree. Yeah, that's an interesting thing to see, the tree, and that is sort of like it's got the roots on top and it's got the roots on the bottom and the like branches on top, and it's sort of a mirror of each other, which is interesting. And what it reminded me of when I was reading the book was the two trees in the Bible, and it was the tree of life, and then it was the tree of knowledge. So I thought it was interesting too.
The tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah, that was really interesting to me, because a lot of people kind of like think of the Adam and Eve story and what that was all about, and they kind of forget the tree of life. And I think there's some symbology in it with what happens in the later chapters with Melkor and Ungoliant. Am I saying that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got that right.
Yeah, and the way that they come in and take both of the trees, which is really interesting. And before we go on any further, I'm sorry, guys. I am just trying Streamlabs for the first time. Everything looks to be working, but I forgot to say hello to the chat. And I just wanted to say, like, who do we have here? We have, like, Jacob here. Jacob's here. And we have John Thomas. And the brothers Arda down here. I thank you guys for being patient with me setting this up and everything. There you go. I think I've highlighted you. I can't find. Oh, here you are. There you are. Okay. If anyone else that's watching later or like right now, thank you and welcome. And sorry about that. I just totally forgot to change the screens with the intro and everything. So yeah, so we got the two trees, and I think that's really interesting. And another thing that I thought was interesting to the world building here was how like the trees provide the light to everything, and then you have the whole world in this sort of like twilight darkness kind of a thing.
Yeah, with starlight being the only source of real light elsewhere, and that's why the first elves to go see Valinor are called the Eldar, right?
The Eldar.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I forgot to write that down. I was making a list of all of the different kinds of elves because there's just so many names, and I think I just got to the ones that were descended from the Three Kings and forgot to do all of the rest of the elves. Yeah. But like, it just you shared some cool pictures with me, and I think while we're talking about this first chapter, I'll show the
first two are in connection with chapter 1.
Yeah, so here you've got, this is the do you want to explain this map a little bit?
Yeah, so before the trees there were the lamps, right? The lamps that were constructed. And then Melkor comes in and destroys those. And so then there's the big first Titanic struggle. And so this is how the world was set up after the lamps were destroyed. So you can see the different sort of realms on the flat Middle Earth, the flat Earth.
I thought this was so funny. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's flat Earth.
Yeah.
No.
Yep.
Everyone get your tinfoil hats on. But yeah, the Earth Ardo was absolutely flat. But
yeah, so you have up in the north. That's where.
So Valinor's up here.
I'm trying to point to things, but obviously people aren't seeing it. But in the north, you have that's where Melkor, who's called Melkor, and as we get through at the end of this passage, we see the name shift from Melkor to Morgoth, and he from then on is called Morgoth, right?
Yeah.
But so in the north is where Melkor exists, and in the west is Valinor, and then everywhere else is essentially just on its own. And Melkor goes through and does all his stuff, and Orome runs through the world too, hunting and slaying the beasts that are Melkor's sort of spawn and creation. But then the other thing that people often forget is that Ulmo does not reside in Valinor.
Yeah, Ulmo the sea guy, like he's just kind of like choosing the depths, and he kind of keeps like an eye on what's going on with like Melkor, right?
He's the one who is arguably of all the Valar the most involved.
Yeah.
He's definitely got like, and I think it's interesting too because it's the sea, and then they talk about the sea being like more of the voice of creation too, and that is interesting.
I particularly really enjoyed the idea of how he utilized the two Maiar that were his to not only work the shoreline but also the rivers and all the underground tributaries, so that even with the influence of Melkor in the world and underground with all the evil, it's the life that was residing underneath is almost fully attributed to, in its continuance to Ulmo.
Yeah. So Ulmo had Ossi for the Maiar in Union, and Ossi was sort of like this god of the sea, so the shallower waters, and he would make storms and stuff. And then his partner was Union, and she would kind of calm the seas and stuff like that. So it is interesting that happened.
The other thing to remember here as well, though, is Ivana. It also wanders Arda.
Yeah, she does.
As she's, the plants and the animals are sort of her projects, so to speak, and so she's constantly out there trying to beat back the illness and the disease that Melkor introduced at this point. And Ivana and Aule are very fascinating coupling, and we'll get to that in the next couple chapters.
Oh, definitely. I really like Yavanna because she's kind of like a Green Man character, except obviously she's a female, so you've got kind of like the mother in nature, like as the like
you
Green
have
Man.
you have Gaia or
Gaia, like a lot of
and Kiris.
Yeah, definitely. And so, okay, and so what else was interesting in this like chapter? And they start talking about men for the first time, and I thought it was really interesting because it saw that they seek beyond the world and find a rest therein, but they have the virtue to shape their life. So they're kind of saying it's like their gift is like free will. But then, and Iluvatar knew that men would mess up, but in the end, like their works would reflect his will. And I just thought that was really interesting because
Well, that's one of the massive themes throughout all of this stuff, right? Like there's people do something, like Melkor does something, but the unintended consequences of Melkor's actions to further his own power and gain have a lead-on effect, right?
yeah, definitely.
But I wouldn't necessarily say the elves don't have free will.
Yeah, that I felt like that was kind of true too. It just I would think they were trying to say like something like there was a I don't know if thematic is right, and because definitely Tolkien wasn't into allegory, but like there was a statement there kind of being made about like the nature of humans and stuff like that. So
yeah, so yeah, it's sort of the idea of what you're talking on with the elves being tied physically and spiritually to Arda, whereas men are not. So men have a lot more reign and scope in terms of what they sort of set their lives in pursuit to, because of that separation of spirit and physicality.
yeah, that's an interesting point. So welcome, Zerkala, and you were saying that it isn't more that men's spirit souls Fea aren't bound to the circles of Middle Earth. I actually don't know because this is the first time I've ever read that. And do you guys have an answer to that, or like, do you have any thoughts on that?
So the elves, just talking about the elves for a second, the big difference between elves and men is that fundamentally is that the elves are not supposed to die. They are immortal beings. Whereas, so if they do die, they just get sent to the halls of Mandos and eventually reincarnated, or not reincarnated, but rebodied. Whereas with men, nobody knows their fate, and it's called the gift of Iluvatar that they die.
Yeah.
And so the interesting thing about men is that you see them. It's almost something I don't think the elves could ever relate to, is that they have to do so much within a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
That concept of mortality that Tolkien tries to explore in depth. I think that's the best thing about the men in Tolkien's universe, is that he explores that concept of what can men do with that little amount of time that is allotted to them.
And it's the idea of the fear of death being a machination of Melkor, right?
Yeah, that's going way ahead, but yeah, you're right. You're absolutely
I know
right.
it's like a very read and find out, and then again you're reminded of the like enormity of this work and how Christopher Tolkien tried to put it together in a concise way that had sort of like a narrative structure. And Jay Ramble, thank you and welcome to the show. You had a question in terms of free will, because one of the major themes in Tolkien is free will. Did Melkor choose the path of evil?
Yes.
What do you guys think?
Yes.
Yeah, he did choose. I'm of the position that he had no ability to choose a different path. His will wasn't necessarily free, even though he would probably say he was free to choose that route.
It's the Christian idea of God's foreknowledge of your choice does not prevent you from making that choice, right? So Iluvatar in his creation of the Ainur, he understands the character of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So because he obviously created them to every small degree, right? So he understood everything about them, and he understood the choices that they would present themselves with, and he understood the choices that they would make, but he still gave them the option to make those choices.
It's the reason why he let the Discord of Melkor and the Song of the Ainur go on for as long as he did, because essentially that is part of the Song of the Ainur, is the Discord of Melkor. And
I thought that was interesting in the first part.
Yeah, he didn't stop Melkor initially. He just let him go on and do his thing and cause chaos in the song. So yeah, I would say definitely Melkor had free will.
Yeah. But again, you're like, Iluvatar also created like evil to be there too. So that's also an interesting thing to ponder and all of that. And I thought it was interesting at the end of this, and because there's so much more to cover, I don't want to do too much on this one chapter, but it sounds like at the end that Iluvatar gave men the gift of death so they wouldn't have to live forever. And that is kind of really crazy, which made me who it's asking about, someone was like, maybe the souls of humans could go back to Iluvatar, but the elves were going to be stuck like on Arda forever, which is kind of an interesting thought.
That for me, my thought with that was, what's really an interesting thing is, for elves, their relationships, their lives, and everything were tied inextricably, really, with the Valar and the Maiar. That the whole relationship there. Men are given this special privilege of, after they have the short course of their lives, they are given a special privilege of a relationship with Iluvatar in a way that not even the Maiar and Valar know what that's about. And and in that you have this, that this becomes very specifically a Christian idea of life after death in one kinship with God.
Well, it's the strength and the power of the elves comes from their extra natural nature, right? So because they are tied to the earth, they're tied to the world. They have a far greater mastery and ability to impose their will on the world around them. And they have access to the sort of the second vision, the sight of the spiritual world, right? Because you throughout the beginning of this and the Ainu Lindalai, it talks about how the Valar are able to put on and off a physical cloak, right? The elves sort of have the ability to kind of perceive into that spiritual realm where they exist without the physical cloak. Sort of. It's a little more murky than that, but it's sort of one of the reasons why later in Lord of the Rings they're able to perceive more greatly the influence of Sauron.
And from a more, I guess, physical standpoint, I believe it was Glorfindel who could see into the Wraith world.
Yeah,
when the
he
Reavers
could
showed
see
up
far more clearly than any other elf.
Yeah, well, that's also because he got power boost in Valinor after he got rebodied. But no, you're right. The elves have more of a connection to the spiritual realm than any of the other races.
I can just see Sauron, Glorfindel, OP, please nerf.
Right.
Yes, Glorfindel, man, that guy, such a Chad. But okay, so what is this illustration, Gadfly? Because where did you find these illustrations too?
They're in my book.
Oh, you have a fancy book. So this is I'm gonna butcher this name, so you guys want to say it for me?
It's the Tanakhi.
Tenakwi. Okay, yeah. So this is where the who went here? Manwë went to live, right? And it was the highest peak that they built, and this was in the first chapter too. That I kind of glossed over because of all the exciting philosophical things.
Yeah. So this is essentially the home of the Valar.
Yeah.
During this sort of first period. And by the way, these are Tolkien's drawings as well that are included in here. So,
oh, that's so good. I need to get that because I don't know if you guys heard me talking about Tolkien's Father Christmas letters. They were so good and they're so cool. And actually, I'll talk about it when we get to I think it's the next chapter. But like he had a lot of really awesome illustrations, and I'm glad that you could share these with us.
I think this is from his watercolor period.
Yeah, he was really into that. So I think that's beautiful. Let me see what the next picture you sent me and see. Okay. Oh, here's another. Okay, let me open these up so I can just share them really fast. Sorry, I have to set this up, but they're gorgeous. Like the third one, I don't think we've gotten to that yet in the book.
No, that's in the 5th chapter.
Yeah.
Of Eldamar and the princes of the Eldali.
Yeah, we've not quite got there before, so I think I'm showing you this one. So this one was Tenakwi. Am I saying that right?
No.
No, this
that one is Tenaketli, which is different to Tenakwi, but it's sort of like this is sort of the image of the highest place of Tenakwi, which is where Manwë set up his operation.
Yeah, it's where his throne sits, if I recall correctly.
Oh, okay. So this is like the highest of the high. That is really, really nice picture. And
where he looks out across all of Arda.
Yeah, I'll show the last one, even though we're not there yet, but it's just pretty.
So that was basically a magnified portion of the previous drawing.
Yeah.
And then this is the one that we're not going to spoil it for me, but it's really pretty too. So, hey, Zax.
What's up, Zax?
Yeah. So, okay, we have so much to cover. I don't want to keep like sticking on this one, even though there's so much to talk to. I like the next chapter, which was of Owly and Yavanna, for a really fun reason. And I told you I was going to talk about the Father Christmas stories again. And in this chapter, because they reminded me of this chapter. In this chapter, we talk about Owly and how Owly gets some like ideas in his head. Like he wants to create something too. And what was interesting in this version of sort of like what Melkor thinks about with wanting to subvert Iluvatar's like will, but he goes about it a way different way, and he ends up like he wants to teach people what he knows and wants to have people working with him, and he wants to create something of his own. So he goes and creates this like race of people like out of stone, and it turns out, hey, they're dwarves. And I just thought this part was really cool. And it's just kind of reminded me of like parenthood too. So go ahead.
That distinction between Melkor and Owly, right? They're both lovers and seekers of knowledge, but the intents and the purpose behind that knowledge are vastly different. Melkor wants the knowledge in this, and he wants to retain it as a secret for his own power, and so on and so forth. Whereas Owly desires the knowledge for the love of Eru and the plan of Eru, and he wants to fulfill that plan, and his love of knowledge is a completely external thing, right?
Yeah,
he desires knowledge for the sake of knowledge, not for the sake of what knowledge brings. And that's a theme that goes through The Hobbit, through The Lord of the Rings, through the Silmarillion, through all of the unfinished tales. Like, and also at the same time, just knowledge isn't just a ephemeral theoretical knowledge. It's the practical knowledge as well. Right?
Oh yeah,
he's the craftsman.
So from what you're saying, then it would be more like how we have this knowledge, and how does this glorify Eru? Because everything ends up redounding to that effect.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? I'm just going to read this one paragraph, because I thought it really tied back to the sort of sentiments that Tolkien was expressing in the Father Christmas letters about like how he's writing these. He's basically in that book, he would write letters to his kids for Christmas, like he was Santa, and he made up all these stories. And what's really cool is there's this kind of overrunning theme of his kids growing up and how he feels towards them as a parent. And I thought this one paragraph really kind of captured that spirit a lot, where he talks about Owly. And I'm just going to read it really fast. So it says this: Then Owly answered, I do not desire such lordship. I desired things other than I am, to love and to teach them, so that they too might perceive the beauty of Ea, which thou hast cause to be. For it seemed to me that there is great room in Arda for many things that might rejoice in it, yet it is, for the most part, empty still and dumb. And in my impatience I have fallen into folly. Yet the making of things is in my heart for my own making by thee, and the child of little understanding that makes a play of the deeds of his father may do so without thought of mockery, but because he is the son of his father. But what shall I do now, so that thou wilt not be angry with me forever? As a child to his father, I offer thee these things, the work of the hands which thou hast made. Do with them what thou wilt, but should I not rather destroy the work of my presumption? And then, like, because of his humbleness and the fact that he was just trying to, like, imitate what Luvatar had done as, like, a form of flattery kind of a thing, like a kid would do, like, imitate his father. Like he lets them keep the dwarves, and he just like puts them to sleep for a while, because he's like, it's not time for them. They'll have their moment, but not now.
Well, the beautiful part of that. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh no, you're good. I think you're about to say exactly what I was about to.
Well, so what I think is the most beautiful part of that entire sequence is when Aule goes to raise his hammer to destroy the dwarves.
Oh yeah,
and then he notices they're kind of leaning back in terror. They're afraid, and that's how he realized that they weren't just, because they were more of like pantomime.
Yeah.
Prior, they were just puppets to him, and now they actually had like souls inside of them, thanks to Eru, because Eru saw Aule's humility, and so he decided to reward him.
I know it is like it's really touching. It says, "Thy offer I accepted, even as it was made. Dost thou not see that these things have now a life of their own, and speak with their own voices? Else they would not have flinched from thy blow, nor from any command of thy will." Aule cast down his hammer and was glad, and he gave thanks to Iluvatar, saying, "May Eru bless the work and amend it."
But it's not without its consequences, though.
True.
Right?
True.
Because that's the other thing, right? This is the first instance of marital strife in the world.
Yep, I was just about to bring that up. Yep.
Yeah, so happy. Yeah, the rest of it, Ivana is not happy. It's kind of funny what she ends up doing. So I gotta go back to my like notes, because I usually read this like and go over it twice, but I didn't get a chance because I was traveling this week. But yeah, so they kind of like, they're just okay. The dwarves are gonna wait for their moment, and that's why they're really tied to Aule, and of course they're of the earth and building and stuff, and Ivana's a plants. So she's always thinking, these guys can't create anything. They are not going to be farmers. They are not going to tend my wonderful creation. So Ivana says, like, you know what? I want my own people too. And so she thinks up the Ents to defend against the dwarves. And I just think that is so awesome. Is there a cooler character than Treebeard? I mean,
When you realize that Treebeard probably killed a dwarf at one point. He probably did.
Dude, like the fight at Isengard is so cool, and I love trees. I'm probably the kind of person that will go up and kind of like feel the bark and kind of feel the energy of the trees. I like to, like, I'm in a master gardening program now, and I'm very grateful to be living in a place that has like some of the most gorgeous trees. And it's like these trees have characters, and like they have history. There's time that has passed here, and I think it's really cool that was her creation, were these like massive trees that are gonna just go on and take over the earth. And Treebeard and the Hurons, like, yeah.
So you like trees? Like, is this like a Shuriam type of thing in her?
You don't like that, but not so stupid. Like I would just do that and kind of meditate and kind of like, I'm touching the tree. I'm like kind of calming myself down, listening to nature, listening to the trees. To me, it's more of a spiritual thing because I am like a witch and I find great peace in nature. So I like doing that. And yeah, but that Sherio video was so cringe. I was like, what is she even doing?
Yeah, but no, but that's hearing like listening to the wind flow through the brush, and it's just a very peaceful thing.
It's very interesting as well.
It's fun reading this too, because for me that is like bringing me back and reminding me of my place in this creation. Like whatever you believe, like in this book or in real life, like we're all connected.
Because Manwë, tells Yavanna that these new men, these new race that is going to spring up is going to have dominion over the world. Mm-hmm. And this whole bit is kind of another running theme throughout Tolkien's work, where men aren't supposed to be the masters of the world. We're supposed to be the stewards of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're supposed to have a great respect for nature and the beauty of nature and the power and majesty of nature, right? So
that's really cool. So Kai Feanor is asking us, so what happened to Amazon Prime? How they disrespectfully do J.R.R. Frank? Yeah. We agree. We've all suffered through Rings of Power, but like we're just trying to remind ourselves. And this is like, if you don't know this, this was the first year that I read Lord of the Rings. I never read it before, which is absolutely disrespectful. But never, better late than never. And
it's only disrespectful if you don't read it ever.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So I wanted to go back and
then try to make a show about it.
Yeah,
I
did,
right.
With my friends over at the White Cloaks, they did a book club reading of Lord of the Rings, and we all read it together. And I wanted to do the Silmarillion too, and so we were talking, and I think me and Feanor were in the chat on that one, and we're like, yeah, let's do the Silmarillion. And I got Nathan from like the White Cloak stream to come on and hear it, and Gadfly too, because he's an awesome guy. And we just wanted to do this really because we love the source material and we want to just remind ourselves of the good that's out there. And I think it's important to kind of go through these things and just kind of understand the like themes and what's going on in the story to really see how these people subverted it, and just remind ourselves that there's good in the world and we don't get demoralized. It's very important to keep faith in these days. And this is very much a story of like faith and stuff. So.
When we get there, we can talk about how they effectively gave Galadriel Feanor's storyline.
Yeah.
Almost.
Time out. I was justified in my actions. Okay, you can't say the same for what that creature in that show did. Okay, unacceptable.
What you mean the Michael Phelps of Middle Earth?
Oh Lord, have mercy. I swear, man, I've been tempted to ask some of my followers to Photoshop a funny little mustache on her for future ones,
Oh, well, I actually took that whole scene and spliced that together with the swimming from the Middle East back to England from Men in Tights and posted that on my channel.
Oh, that's funny. I did I made a short and it was really bad because I didn't know how to do video editing at the time when it came out, where like that part in Lord of the Rings where like Galadriel's looking into the, what is it called, the mirror. Something of mirror.
The mirror. Yeah.
The mirror of Galadriel. And like she's like, what has been and what will ever be. And then I did all these like clips from like Rings of Power. And it's just like Frodo like jumps back.
Just have a voiceover of when Galadriel goes evil Galadriel, Dark Queen Galadriel. You have not seen what I have seen.
Oh dear Lord.
Okay. Next chapter is chapter 3, Coming of the Elves and the Captivity of Melkor. So Melkor comes back and he's building his strength, and he is kind of going out like outside of Valinor into these Twilight realms, and it's kind of like that whole like evils breeding in the dark thing. And he's on the northwestern shores, and just trying to go through this and see what this like. And so some of the guys, some of the Ainurs go out into the world sometimes, and I think it was Aromi that goes out because he's kind of the huntsman guy and sees these things. So he's kind of giving them reports back that they're like that he's doing stuff, and the other guys are like, well, you know, we're safe in Valinor now. We don't really want to do anything. And let me see.
Yeah, he's scouting. He's getting involved.
Yeah. Just trying to think about what
he's a hunter, right? So like a hunter's got to hunt.
Yeah, so what ends up happening is that Varda like decides that she needs to do something because the lamps were extinguished, and she draws up the light and makes the stars. And I thought that was an interesting thing. And like I feel like there's some mythological connections. What do you think, Gadfly? Does this like remind you of anything? I just didn't have time to look it up.
She's making a bunch of the constellations, right? And putting them in the sky in their places. So she makes the great sickle or the great scythe, right? Which is in some places it's called the wain or the wagon. In other places recently it's called the Big Dipper. Yeah,
that's interesting. I didn't think that it was actually our sky. Wow, that's cool.
But then also there's the Titan in the sky. With his belt, which is, of course,
Orion.
Most people see as Orion.
I didn't think of that. Oh my goodness, that's crazy. Oh,
so goodness. She's essentially setting up the now known skyline.
Yeah, and so it's when he's out and he's hunting that Aromi actually finds the elves, and they called them the Kendi. And that means those who speak with voices. And they're the first elves that were discovered by Aromi while he's hunting because of their song. And again, they're going back to the music thing, which I just think is awesome. And they were named Eldor by Aromi, which mean people of the stars because of the stars that Varda had just made. And then it turns out, hey, you know, while you guys have been hanging out in Valinor, like Melkor has discovered these poor elves and he's kidnapped them. And then this is interesting because, you know, you guys were talking about this before where they're talking about how did orcs come to be? And then here it's like where they talk about them and it says they kidnapped the elves, corrupted and enslaved them, and thus bred orcs. Yep. And this was kind of curious because I think Tolkien had some like changes of heart about how he wanted to portray what orcs were. And
he kind of dithered between, do orcs have free will, do they not? If orcs have
or do they have souls, like could they be like,
savable?
Yeah, exactly.
But the idea presented here is that just like what Melkor does with everything, he grabs it, twists it, misshapes it till it becomes something, a perverse image of what it once was. So the orcs are in all basic respects like elves, except that everything in their formation is aimed not at the glorifying of Eru Ilúvatar and the world he has created, but more lined to the destruction and dismantling of it.
Yeah.
And in the Silmarillion, it says that the orcs hate Morgoth.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. That was interesting. Yeah, that was the point. Thank you for reminding me that. Let me read it really fast. It said, and deep in their dark hearts, the orcs loathe the master whom they served in fear, the maker only of their misery. This, it might be, was the vilest deed of Melkor and the most hateful to Ilúvatar, because it's like his mockery of the creator. It's like making them hate the person who made us, which I think, if I remember correctly, is sort of like some of the things that they talk about later, like in Wormtongue. It's like they hate themselves for what they are. They hate themselves for what they've become because they've been corrupted.
The other thing as well is an individual who rules and governs by fear and force is someone who is hated and loathed by his population, right? There's no love there. There's no desire to serve that person. It's being done so only out of fear and the threat of violence being done to them if they don't.
Yeah.
So Melkor cannot engender loyalty and cannot engender respect and love from his followers. Even the followers who are the Maiar who followed him, they cannot love, respect, or admire Melkor.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
And you see this also in how the orcs relate to Sauron in Lord of the Rings. It's a complete fear thing. There's nothing that
They don't like him. Good point.
That's why evil in general has always within itself a discordance, because like earlier in the last time we talked, we have Melkor as this presentation of ice and fire.
It's like
there's this whole completely discordant thing, and what that last sentence was probably out of these first few chapters the thing that most rang out to me, because it's what he's done is he's taking this precious thing of life that is created and he's destroyed it to something that is really in a sense, life is to be loved, and this twisted form of creation hates life.
Yeah, it's like, I think Unknown Sage really pointed out, this is what they probably refer to with the quote, evil cannot create, it can only destroy. So I think that's a great point. And this is the kind of I want to get to the good stuff. We're just getting good stuff with it. So what ends up happening is that Oromi tells the Valar about what's happening, and they decide, okay, we need to talk to the elves because we need to protect them. And so he invites 3 of the kings to come as envoys, and it does take them some encouragement to go to Valinor because they really like the world they're in. And I thought that's really interesting because if you're looking at elves in general, they're very tied to the earth and stuff like that. And the elves here are very much in wonder of Arda and the things that are there. And so what ends up happening is that they take 3 brothers, Ingwe, Finwë, and Elwë, to ambassadors to the Valar, and they kind of talk them into leaving. And so they do end up leaving. And then I'm going to share something I made here. Let me see if I can get my tab window. Where is that? Here we go. I made this to kind of, I think the next chapters talk about this too, but to kind of keep everything going on. Mm-hmm. And you guys in chat are really awesome. You guys are helping me out when I need it. I really appreciate you. But the
interesting thing about this too, before you go on, is that
go for it.
There's some scholars, and even it's kind of hinted at in the text, that the invitation given by the Valar was actually a mistake. that they shouldn't have done that. Well, and I believe it was
Mandos's quote, right? Yeah. So it is. So it is doomed, right?
And he says also when it says right here.
That was interesting because they debated among themselves, and it is interesting to think because it's would you bring humans to say Mount Olympus? And there's lots of trouble that happens with that, and I think the existence of these sort of demigods and Greek and Roman mythologies kind of proof to that. But that's a tangent we won't go off on because I know probably have a lot of thoughts on that too, Gadfly. But
Mando says, "Great light shall be for their waning." So the light of Valinor and being away from that and all that. But I believe it was Ulmo, and he was the one who insisted, no, let's just leave the elves alone. But he was overruled.
That is really interesting. And I think that's an interesting point you do, brothers. is because that we know that the like Valar are fallible and that they make mistakes, and we'll get to some of their other mistakes later on in this chapter. But just going back to quickly, like, hey Jana, my girl Jana. Just going back to this, so we have like there's 3 groups, and I'm just trying to get everyone that went together. So Ingwe leads the first group, which are called the Vanyar, and they all kind of go, but they need help from Oromi to guide them. And they're so young in the world still that they're kind of enamored by what they see, and they keep like wandering away, and they stop traveling like when he leaves them and stuff. So there ends up like being several groups that leave. So the next group to leave is Finwë, and his group of people becomes known as Noldor. And Noldor. I think everyone just loves the Noldor except for me. Because I'm a beach girl, hence my outfit today. If you guys are just coming in the chat, like, this isn't the day I was going to be a hoe and just like go for a little like bikini stream. I was just, there's a lot of like Noldor love in this chat and in this panel, so I was going to represent the Teleri here. So yeah, the Teleri were the 3rd group, and they were I think they were the largest. And they were also known as the Sea Elves because what ends up happening is that they migrate and end up staying around the sea. I should have gotten a map, but it tells you where they go. And there's a lot of like details and stuff like that I'm not going to cover because we just don't have that much time. And eventually the Vanyar go up to Valinor, and who was it? I think Olmo ends up like making a like island that takes them across, and part of it gets stuck. So there's this cool creation myth for that.
And Ossé is very much enamored by them.
He's really
one thing that's I mean, we kind of skipped over it, was like sort of the second battle between the Valar and Melkor, right? And that's where Melkor gets defeated. And chained up.
Because when they're going to the when they're crossing the big mountain range, and then they fight him again, and they actually catch him. And was there a part in there like and they do chain him up, and he is like, what do? They sentence him for like
3 ages.
3 ages, so he gets locked up for a long time. When you see the term age kind of loosely defined, that's effectively a 1,000-year period.
Yep.
So that gives you some idea of the time span that happened leading up to Feanor's rebellion.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Because I'm sitting here thinking of ages and how Middle Earth refers to an age, and it's not. Those are not equated terms. Then
everything you're saying is not English. I know, okay, Jana, I get so lost in this. That's why I have these guys, because like I gotta say, like, it is fun reading this, and there's so much verisimilitude in here with what Tolkien did and how he really he understands linguistics so much that the language is really cool. And I was not very good at linguistics in college, but I can understand like the naming conventions and stuff, and I think that is just really awesome. And I like how he does give like 3 names for things. It's confusing as hell when you're reading it, but if you've ever studied any of this stuff, like, you are totally aware that this is a thing that happens in real life. So
I'll add more confusion. I just grabbed my Languages of Tolkien Middle Earth dictionary here. So
yeah. And so,
nice.
Elwë leads the Teleri, which become the Sea Elves, and then they break off into a group called the Nandor, which stayed in the woods, and they were more like the real nature-centered elves. And then there were the Sindar, and then the Sindar are going to come up in the next chapter. And then there were all the Felithrim, which, let me see, I could turn the page on my notes here. Those were the ones that missed the first boat, and they were kind of stay on the shore. And then eventually
they were the ones who were searching for Elwë.
Oh yes, Elwë, because
Elwë up in the next chapter.
Yeah, I like this. Let's just get to this next chapter. So chapter 4 is of Thingol and Melian, and Melian's a Maiar. If you remember from last time, I had to look that up to remember who she was, but she's of the Valar, and Elway ends up meeting her in the forest, and this is just so funny because it's like they spend an age just staring at each other before they can say hello. Like,
We've all
before
been
they can
there.
talk. And like,
It's,
like,
it is really interesting though, because it's once again it's Tolkien with his knowledge of myth and mythology and stuff, because this is almost exactly the same setup as Artemis and Adonis, right? Whereas
yeah,
Adonis
I couldn't
sees
remember the
Artemis,
name of the song.
but
Yeah.
because Artemis has to remain a virgin in the Greek mythology, he gets turned into or is it Adonis?
Yeah.
But he gets turned into a stag, and his own dogs tear him apart because you can't have a human.
Yeah. Or wasn't that Actaeon? Or was that
Yes.
Actaeon?
Adonis was a different. Adonis was a different human lusting, or a goddess lusting after Adonis, and so there was a punishment that had to happen in that way.
Yeah, definitely. You can't touch that. But this one he did, and they spoke no word, but being filled with love, Elway came to her and took her hand, and straight away a spell was laid on him. They stood thus while long years were measured by the wheeling stars above them, and the trees of Nan Elmoth grew tall and dark before they spoke any word. Like, bro, talk to her. Kiss the girl.
So I got excited reading this part. Like, again, it's been 20 years since I had read this, and the version that I had read was this itty bitty little paperback like what you have, Lady B. And in this version that I now have this big ass map.
Oh, shoot. Let me bring you to the forward. Let me see how I do this.
When I sit there and have the presence of mind to sit there and actually look at the maps while I'm reading, like this time, I'm like, okay, Nen Emloth, and I'm looking all over the place, and I'm like, oh, that little bit of woods right there.
Oh my gosh, my map is so bad. I need that map. That looks great.
And so for the first time, I'm actually placing this in a spot, and I'm horrible with geography anyway. So having that there, I get all excited about it because I'm like, okay, now I can put a spot, and then I got to try and tie this back to actual Middle Earth as we know it with Lord of the Rings, which, from what I understand, is more right here.
Yeah, pretty much. It's and it's just so interesting. You get a scale of the world by looking at the maps. It's really you get a really good What I used to like to do is I would read the text and have a map right there and just follow, dotted line, follow where everybody was going at every single moment in time, and gives you just a sense of scale.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where that's one of the great things that Lord of the Rings movies, they included the map, and they centered you in a geographic sense. And that's what so much of fantasy productions in the past couple of decades, and really, almost for the most part, the entire time they've tried to ever adapt fantasy at all, period, is when you don't sit there and you put a map with it, you have a tendency to get viewers that get lost in things because they don't know where to put things.
Yeah, there's no sense of continuation either.
Right.
You also see the writers doing the whole fast travel thing that happens and happens a lot more frequently now, where it's just they turned up with their boats in the middle of this desert.
Right. Well, and that's a great point, because you can sit there and actually say, like, Game of Thrones was a really good show for the first 4 seasons, because they actually stuck with the map and actually kind of contained the story to logical positions with it. And then they got away from that in the latter seasons, and it failed.
Yeah, everybody was fast traveling. It was,
which really kills the epic scale of epic fantasy, which I think we all like, because there's definitely a travelogue kind of feel to a lot of these stories, and I think that is really awesome.
It's also when everything happens out of circumstance. It gets you rolling your eyes. When a couple things happen out of circumstance, it's believable because circumstance happens in the real world. But when everything circumstance,
Right.
and you're now expected to believe that someone is masterfully pulling the strings to orchestrate everything spectacularly, but you never see the evidence of it.
Yes.
Um,
And again, I reference Rings of Pewter.
Ugh.
Galadriel can swim across the sea because you didn't stick a map really with it, or she can appear at that one little village because you didn't contextualize anything, so it makes it all possible, which
Right.
makes no sense. But
Oh,
why not?
the fast traveling in that show is atrocious. It's
Yeah, it's so
horrible.
bad.
It's so bad. But let's not dwell.
Yeah, let's not get like on the back because we have a
Right.
lot to cover. So
Let's
the cool
just
thing
remember
about-
this amazing romantic
Yeah.
moment that
Yes.
lasted 1,000 years.
Yeah, and then of their union, they end up getting married, and they end up staying there, and he becomes like they're the progenitors of the Sindar group of elves, and Sindar means gray elves, and they're elves of the twilight. And he changes his name to Eleuthingol in the tongue of the land, and they said something interesting because it's like the Sindar was like had people who had never seen the light, which I thought that was kind of an interesting concept there.
Mhm. But there's actually what's interesting is there's two different groups of elves that have never seen the light. There's the Sindar, and then there's also the Avari. The Avari were the ones who absolutely refused to even.
Oh
go
yeah, I forgot to put them in there. I feel like you guys know that like meme with that guy, and he's got all the strings and he's pointing at everything. Like I made this map like that, and I'm just kind of like trying to remember everything.
The breakup in your chart would be the Avari and the Eldar, and then all of what you have is under the Eldar.
Yeah, these are all the Eldar here. Let me see if I have
the Moraquendi. Yeah,
that's
I forgot them. I think that it was just like something I just didn't add to my thing, and I just made this in 5 times. Let me solo that so you could see it.
there we go.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, there is. It's at the back of the map. I should have just gone there instead of like going to my own thing. But yeah, you're right. There was a lot of it.
And this is the benefit of having this nice hardback edition is these things are really blown up and you can actually
mine is so painful.
Paperbacks are so tough to read with this stuff.
Yeah, and it's yellowed and stuff. But yeah, so and then they go to Eldamar and the Princes of Elite. I was like, what was this chapter? I don't know. It's like I remember the first chapters and then Feanor. Yeah, so it's more about the traveling of stuff and like did you guys have anything to say about this chapter or chapter 5?
Well, it's just a very concise here is where everybody is at this.
Oh, yeah, they introduce go ahead.
They introduce Círdan the Shipwright. They talk about the kinsfolk and the friends of Elwë Singolo. And just it's just it's almost like a continuation of chapter 3.
Círdan the Shipwright, he's the only bearded elf.
Because he's so dang old.
I just thought it's because he's so badass.
No, it's legitimate because he's just that ancient. He's the only elf to ever. I believe he is the only elf during the time of the Third Age, Frodo, and all that. He's the only elf left in Middle Earth that was there for the Great Journey.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because
what we learn later on is like the elves start to grow weak in their attachment to their body, essentially, and grow weary. But we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that later.
Yes.
Yeah. So Jacob was wondering what copy of the Silmarillion is the one you have.
It is the illustrated version that they just released last November. Has 2 maps of Beleriand in it, and then all the Tolkien original art in there that we've been looking at and will continue to look at, hopefully.
Cool.
I'll show the cover too. There's the cover, wonderful, and then it's got the Elvish in green writing on the binding or the
book port
pages. It is This was my Christmas present last year from my kids. So
Oh, that's nice. That's really nice.
It's a good reason to have
Okay.
kids.
I know, right?
Speaking of kids, this is where we start meeting
All
the
right.
elves. Yeah. Do you want to do the introductions, Fade, or like
Let's
talk
do
about
this.
your family?
All right. So actually, I am going to. There was something.
If you want to go back or you need to do anything, feel free.
Well, I was going. I'm just because I don't know how to screen share on here. I was just going to.
I think you can put like where it says present, like it should say on the settings. I think you can do that.
Okay. Well, anyway, I sent you a picture if you want to share. I sent it over the Discord. It's
Oh, okay.
the High King's mother, Muriel.
Oh yeah.
And
that was I think
and,
one of my memes that got cut off of my original thing. I'll show you. I'll have to show it to you guys later.
but
Is it?
let's see here. In that time was born in Eldamar, in the house of the king in Tyrion, upon the crown of Tuna, the eldest of the sons of Finwë, and the most beloved. Cura Finwë was his name, but by his mother he was called Feanor, the spirit of fire, and thus he is remembered in all of the tales of the Noldor. Great introduction. Yeah, and
I like the epic voice put in behind that. So well
you have
done,
to
sir.
put bass into that. Muriel was the name of his mother, who was called Serinde because of her surpassing skill in weaving and needlework, as you can see in the a lot of the artwork of her shows her weaving like the timeline of events.
Oh yeah,
So,
that
like,
is really
she-
cool. I wish I could
she'll-
make this bigger on my screen, but
So much of her the artwork done of her is like her weaving the death of Celebrimbor, the flight of the Noldor, all the different the Silmarils, all that sort of
yeah,
stuff.
she kind of reminds me of one of the Valar. Who was it? Like she was a weaver.
She got so wearied from the birth of Feanor, though, that she ended up passing.
Yes,
She went to the halls of Mandos.
she did.
And then Finwë got remarried, much to the chagrin of the best High King that ever High Kinged.
FLM.
But yeah, no. Feanor. I mean, how much do you guys want me to go in this? I can go on this.
Go into just give us the whole thing because because there's a family feud kind of going on there, right? Because she dies and she goes to the Undying Lands, and you kind of like get a feeling about what happens to elves when they die, and it's that they just sort of it's interesting because like her body persisted, but her spirit was elsewhere, so that's weird. But
it's almost like a stasis.
Yeah, Snow White. Ooh,
yeah, kind of. What was I gonna say? So a little bit about Feanor as a character. He was the one who created the written language of the elves, the Tengwar. He master craftsman, created, obviously, as we're gonna find out later, the Silmarils. He created the Seeing Stones, the Palantir. All 7 of the Seeing Stones were created by him. Like I said, master craftsman. Ended up marrying Nerdanel. I can see if I can. She was a master sculptor, so the craftsmanship.
She was the daughter of the greatest of the elven smiths.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And who eventually I would surpass. Feanor would surpass him. I believe Feanor. I believe I was looking at a because oftentimes I like to look at like the power scaling of characters in Middle Earth. And as far as craftsmen go, Feanor, I believe, was only second to Aule.
Yeah, he was like early, which is kind of interesting because it's like there's sort of this idea that he was given some kind of divine power, and then you see what choices he makes and the things that happen to him, which makes me wonder. It's like, can this kind of divine ability to create, whether it's like races of people like Aule did, or like whether it's powerful things like Feanor did, like does that belong to mortal men?
Well,
or
that's
like
kind of
not.
It's interesting you bring that up because I've heard a few theories. I don't personally believe these, but I've actually heard a few theories that, and there's nothing in the text to support this, but that Feanor was the physical manifestation of the oh shoot, what is it called? The not the everlasting flame. It's the fire that
Oh yeah, like the fire
The
of
imperishable flame.
the imperishable flame. Thank you.
Yeah,
that
that's interesting.
he's the physical manifestation of that, which is why his body could not tolerate being on Earth.
That's
do
an
I believe
interesting
that?
theory.
It's an interesting theory.
Yeah,
One I would say no to, but we can go into that at a different time if you really want to go at it.
No. I'm in agreement with you. I'm not. I don't buy into that theory at all. It's just a theory that I've heard, but it's mainly due out of the fact of what his mother's name for him was, and the fact of how he ended up passing. We'll get into that later. But no. Very, very, very skilled, very, very jealous character. Jealousy is one of his big flaws, which we end up finding out quite soon, don't we? Once his dad decides to get hitched with someone else and have 2 more sons.
Well, this is another thing that's very fantastic about Tolkien. Unlike almost all other authors out there, he understands the difference between jealousy and envy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because envy is you're desirous of another person's thing. Jealousy, you're covetous of your own thing and you want no one else to have it, right? And so it's that's why the jealous girlfriend is the one who doesn't let her man talk to other girls and vice versa. But the envious the envious girlfriend or the envious girl is the one who secretly sows discord between the pairing in order to break them up, so that right just the tropes and themes you see in fiction on these types of things.
Yes, Copa, this is a world building book, so it might be too much for you. We have this conversation a lot on Zach streams that Copa is also a writer and he hates world building. So
I want to trust the brothers art. Yes, I am fully aware it's a very stupid theory. It's just a theory that I've heard.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Why do I love Lord of the Rings? Come on. Oh, it's not showing. Okay. I like it because I just think it's interesting. It goes back, it's written in the sort of like literary tradition of really, really old works like Beowulf. Like it's the epic kind of literature thing. The themes of it are absolutely amazing. I absolutely love the story of hope. I love the literary skill that went into it and all of the world building, languages, all the poetry that's in there. So it's just something as an English major that I've really appreciated because I've studied so much, I've read so much, and I really saw how somebody took all of this history and made something just beautiful with it. So yes. Sometimes I tell people because I've heard the silly stuff, but yeah, I get very silly, but yeah. So you want to keep going, Feanor?
Oh yeah. Let's see here. So so we get into the noontide of Valinor. Feanor's being a terrific craftsman. The wedding of his father was not pleasing to Feanor, and he had no great love for Indis, his father's second wife. Nor for Fingolfin and Finarfin, her sons. And he just kind of I think this is another reason why he ended up becoming the way that he was that he secluded himself. He just spent his time with his crafts. He didn't bother to actually try and assimilate himself with his 2 half brothers, and he was disappointed with his father, and he almost kind of became.
It's another one of those examples of Tolkien really understanding human nature and human tragedy, right? Like we essentially have here a situation where a mother has died in childbirth, and it's a single father, a single parent which Tolkien knew a lot about, because his mom was a single mom growing up, and the difficulties that come in that package of integrating with society and with the rest of the family, especially if that family then goes and continues to grow, right? So like even little things in this are very, very insightful displays and of humanity and the human condition, as you hear a lot of people talk about.
It's also like it's as like a verisimilitude with historical things, because there were a lot of kind of like succession issues. I know that was a big thing if you've ever read Game of Thrones and the kind of work that J.R.R. Martin did in that, and how he was trying to mirror like the War of the Roses. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and with Feanor, he has a tendency to project a lot of his insecurities about his father onto Fingolfin. One of the things that he says when he pulls his sword on Fingolfin, he says, I'm paraphrasing, but I have the book right here. I can look at it. But he essentially says, "You're trying to steal my father away from me."
Yeah. It is interesting how like the family kind of problem is kind of the root of what's going on. What ends up being like this, what do they call it? The sundering of the elves or something like that?
The flight of the Noldor.
The flight, yeah.
It's also the vile machinations of Melkor, right? Like I'm one who thinks that if Melkor hadn't whispered his poisons, we didn't talk. Oh, we can't forget the rest of Melkor. Like what happens is like
the Valar unchained him.
6 is like so. Oh boy, yeah. Would you like to share that? It's we're not the only ones that got into this episode. Nathan here made something really cool.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what I have in my pipe is a blend that I made.
The Melkor blend.
Oh yeah,
it's dark.
It's a blend of 3 different tobaccos. It is just potent and dank as hell, and it's very dark.
That's beautiful. I bet it smells wonderful.
No, it doesn't.
Nope. Is it like pipe weed?
It is. It's one of those blends that you, if you are sensitive to room note, it's not for you.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Dark and smoky.
Now, I need to address Brothers Arda. Feanor would have turned upon Fingolfin no matter what. I disagree with that. I think so. Spoilers for ahead. If a little incident doesn't take place, and by little incident, it's pretty damn big incident. If a little incident doesn't take place, I think Feanor and Fingolfin would have been together the whole time against Morgoth.
Especially with Finarfin there. Finarfin was a very he was the wise one. He was the sensible one, the sort of the peacemaker type almost. And without the lies and the poison of Melkor, lies and poison breaking up families. Okay. So without that, Finarfin, if peace could not have been brokered between Fingolfin and Feanor on their own, Finarfin would have been able to broker a peace between them for sure.
Yeah.
Which there eventually was a peace that was brokered between them, and Fingolfin essentially swore fealty to Feanor, saying, "Listen, I'll follow you wherever you go," and he did.
Yeah. So let's talk about Melkor. So he does his time, and he comes out for parole, which I think is just interesting.
And this is also where he starts being called Morgoth in the book.
Oh yeah. That was a name given. Wasn't that given to him by Feanor? Actually,
it was by yeah.
It's the first instance of the term Morgoth coming up, and Melkor. The term Melkor, the name Melkor, is used for another chapter, but I think the chapter after, that is the chapter where there's a strict change, where it's like, and he was called forever thereafter, and the book continues to call him that.
So they give him parole, and it is interesting because this is something that comes up in a lot of fiction, or like mostly a lot of fantasy, when it's like high fantasy and it's good and evil, and it's sort of like, what is the utility of mercy? They decide to have mercy on him, and Mandos like is allowed to kind of roam in Valinor, but he's kind of like he's on parole, so they have to like watch him, and he's not allowed to go anywhere else. And I think this is a very interesting philosophical point here, because it's like, okay, are we going to like, what, like, is it good to be merciful even though you know the person you're dealing with is awful, or is it good to like not be merciful? And what did you guys like think about this part?
Well, to contextualize it, Manwë thought, and in the eyes of Iluvatar, Manwë and Melkor were brothers.
Yeah.
And so Manwë, being naive, was like, okay, we left my brother. Essentially, we left my brother in there long enough. Let's pull him back out. I'm sure he's, he's reformed now, to use more modern terminology. And we'll keep him here just as like just to keep an eye on him and everything like that. But it was more of a brotherly love more than anything, the way I've always read it.
Oh, that's an interesting take on it.
That that allowed Melkor to be set free, and it ended up biting the Valar in the butt. But
yeah, it was interesting because the sermon that we had at church was actually talking about a lot of different passages on forgiveness, and it's like, if I think the quote was like, if my brother sins against me, you don't like forgive him 70 times. You you forgive him 7 and 7 or 70 and 7 times or something like that.
70 times 7.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that like, it's not up to you to sort of like seek vengeance and retribution. That belongs to God, and you can forgive. And that was a lot of like very Christianity in that part, I thought.
Well, and there's a difference in between vengeance and justice.
Yeah.
And the line got blurred here, I think, in terms of Manwë, because he's thinking of him as kind of a reformed kind of, or the punishment. Maybe he thought the punishment was met, and then,
Well, the other thing I forgot about too, I just read it, was that Manwë could not comprehend the concept of evil.
Oh yeah, that was another really good point I wanted to break up, because it is really interesting is that these people are so like, they were, it's like they were given the one part of the song to sing, and like I always thought that to say that like, God gives us like our role in life, and that like, we can understand what our own part in this song or life or whatever you want to explain it is. But like, you can't really comprehend anything else, because that is just so far out of your like our own realm of understanding that we
there
can't
are quite a number of the Valar who talk about how they have heard the other people singing, the other Valar singing along, and have heard their parts and have learned from those other people's parts and have adapted, right? But there's Melkor was not like that. He was focused solely on his own part. But the idea that Manwë didn't have this not capability, but didn't have this sort of mindset to comprehend and understand how evil operates.
Yeah.
And so in his mind, it was, okay, well, he's said he's, repentant.
So you believed him.
We're going to, let him engage in society, essentially. But at the same time, you also have Ulmo and Tulkas.
And they're like,
and they're both like, no.
Like, brah, like, no.
They don't stop it, though. They don't stop Manwë, but they are attentive. And that, I think, is the lesson there. It's you can provide a mercy for somebody who displays repentance, but you still have in the back of your mind this person's sin against you, right?
Yeah.
And so you can always then judge the person's actions, and that's why Melkor has to take so long to to engage with his plan, because he knows that if he starts engaging with his deceit and his deception right away in his plan to overthrow them, then he's going to get caught. So he has to placate them.
And I'm missing the portion there, but there was something in there where Olmo or Tulkas had a relationship with Melkor that allowed them to be able to kind of perceive that type of thing, whereas Manwë and Melkor didn't have that same association. So you're talking about how the music, that like you would hear other people's parts, and they would hear other people's parts and kind of see how that worked together. And Manwë had his, and I don't and associated with others, but I don't think he associated in his music anything with Melkor, whereas the other two guys did. And that's why they're not as a part of this deception, whereas Manwë couldn't conceive it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
I'm
you're right.
That.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it was Olmo, because it says flat out right here. But Olmo was not deceived, just flat out,
Right.
just pinpoint. Nah, he wasn't fooled at all. He knew Melkor was still up to no good.
Definitely. Yeah, so like I don't want to like get off part, but like so what happens is like they let Melkor out, and Melkor starts on this evil plan. He's got like a long con going on, and he starts like he realizes, okay, people in the Noldor will listen to me, and he starts telling them things and sowing discord among many people stuff, and like craftsmen kind of gets into that way. And then all the Silmarils at the unrest of the Noldor is 7, and what happened? Well, Feanor starts like crafting stuff, and it talks about him finding gems and stuff, and I thought that was really interesting. He finds them, and then he figures out how he can make them, and then he realizes that he can fashion them, like he can give them power. He has to do. He wants to capture the light in the in Valinor. And so that's how he ends up making the Silmarils. Or like, let me know, you guys, like, kind of,
So the interesting thing about the Silmarils is that he essentially, when he made them, he essentially harnessed. It's not quite the imperishable flame, but he essentially harnessed the power of like the cosmos in order to pull this off. I mean, it was
like I think about Varda making the stars, basically. It was akin to that.
It was akin to that, absolutely. And which is spoiler alert for later on, why the crown is so heavy on Morgoth's head is because of the sheer power of these things, and the fact that Feanor was able to use his skill to harness that power and just put it in these 3 jewels. It's really something.
It's really interesting too, because later on, like they I'm gonna get my head of myself, but like Morgoth like hooks up with this spider woman creature named Mongolian, and he wants to take over, and he figures she can use her to help him. Like she drinks the light out of the world, and so once they make this happen, and choose like he has like when they want to help. It's like this song created only once in my life, and I could never make it again. Yeah.
And I believe it was once we get to that part, I believe it was it Olmo or Tulkas who told the Valar, hey, don't ask Feanor for the Silmarils, because this is a greater thing than you guys know you're asking for. Like this is
maybe we should just go there and just kind of talk about the last like 2 chapters, because they're all kind of like
It's
all mushed together,
it's all kind of one story. So that's what ends up happening.
Worth remembering for this story that that Feanor starts seeing the light within the Silmarils as something of his own devising, as opposed to something of harnessing the light from the trees, and that ends up being one of those things that comes in. And
I mean, Grant, the light. I was gonna meme and be like, well, it was a creation of his own. Everything that you hear otherwise is propaganda. But no, you're right. It's the actual lore. Yeah, he starts coveting quite a bit.
Yeah.
And thinking things are solely from his skill when they really aren't.
Yeah, I kind of viewed him as in this part of the story is he's the guy. He sees all this press being written about him. He starts believing all that's there, especially when you have the Valar kind of deferring to his creation in order to be able to recreate what they after Ungoliant had swallowed the trees, and and he's like, oh, now you need me.
Yeah, you need me now. And this is after you guys banished me to Formanos, and because I pulled a sword on my brother, which you shouldn't have done. But no, absolutely. It's and the other underlying part of this is Feanor sees all of the Valar, including Melkor, in this kind of just like ball. He sees them all as like the same thing. Yeah. It's not that he lacks the capacity. He's just so narrow-minded that he can't differentiate between Melkor and the rest of the Valar. He sees them all as kind of a kindred. And so when they start asking him for his Silmarils, and Melkor's already gone and done that when he had a door slammed in his face by Feanor. He's Feanor's really messed up at this point right now, like, in terms of like figuring out who his real friends actually are.
Yeah.
So it's worth noting that it's Owly, the Maker, who says, "Be not hasty. We ask a greater thing than thou knowest. Let him have peace yet a while." So Owly, the Maker, who's someone who understands the love of the craft and the amount of oneself that one puts into these things. It says, hey, just give the guy some peace, right? And also Mandos does speak up as well. But Mandos is one of those people who, when he speaks, something's going on that nobody understands.
So while he's up there too, he starts spreading rumors about people. He tells Feanor that his brothers are plotting against him. I think he says the same thing to the brothers.
Melkor.
Yeah. It sort of reminds me of the Cain and Abel story.
Yep, exactly. Well, that's what it ends up in, right? It's the first kinslaying.
And and then it's like there's great strife, and Feanor draws his sword and threatens his brother, you're not gonna take me up my birthright and stuff like that. And then the guys end up having to be called back in front of the Valar, and I think they're in the halls of Mandos, and and then it ends up Feanor gets exiled, and he starts his own little colony, I guess you could say, with his dad, Finwë, and they lock up all of the stuff that they've made, and they start making weapons too. That was interesting, because they talk about all the stuff they make, and no one had ever made weapons before, but then they start making weapons. So,
but that's another one of those things that's very interesting, though, when you think about it, because this is Melkor's devising of sowing discord, created weapons, which were then used to defeat Melkor. So, we'll get, and obviously the Lord of the Rings happened, so Melkor didn't win. But it's this Melkor's devising and scheming to cause strife for his own gain brought about the ability for the mortals to resist him.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because of what happens and the lengths that he pushes, Finwë's sons, and the discord he sows actually comes back on him. And it's it says, by cunning his overreached his aim, his words touched too deep and awoke a fire more fierce than he designed. And Feanor looked upon Melkor with eyes that burned through his fair semblance and pierced the cloaks of his mind, perceiving there his fierce lust for the Silmarils. Then hate overcame Feanor's fear, and he cursed Melkor and bade him be gone, saying, "Get thee gone from my gate, thou jail crow of Mandos." And he shut the doors of his house in the face of the mightiest of all the dwellers in Gaea. So he kind of called him on his bluff.
Yeah, Feanor didn't care. he just
No.
like, that's the one thing about his character is like that you find out is just there's
Chad.
it says he overcame his fear, but let's be real, there was just no fear there to the point of
well, and that's an interesting term too, the jail crow. I mean, that's a harsh statement when you actually consider what he's saying there.
Like, to somebody that's like a Valar too. He like just doesn't even care. I don't care. Like, gross.
Well, right. And what's interesting is he says the same thing to Fingolfin too beforehand when he calls him out of jealousy. Get thee gone is like one of his favorite things to say, apparently, because he's just like, get out of here.
Bye, Felicia. Yeah, so, and then I think the darkening of the Valinor talks over Melkor's plot, where it's really interesting because back to the Twilight thing, where it's like you think that the Valar would be more watchful over their creation, but during the Twilight time, Melkor had been out and he was, creating minions, and they talk about this one called Ungoliant who was living in like at the south, and like it was like where was all like not Isengard, but like Mordor and stuff in Lord of the Rings, was it in the same place or was it different?
No. So where Ungoliant resided was in the south of Valinor, where really nobody went.
Okay.
She was in Valinor proper.
Okay.
And so what
I
happened
was a little
was
confused on that.
When Tolkien after I believe it was after they had called Feanor to the Council of the Valar, what have you, and all the lies of Melkor had been discovered, Tolkien and Arome went north to hunt down Melkor and bring him back in, because they figured, okay, he's going back to his old stronghold. But what Melkor really did is he went south. And so nobody knew where he was, and he knew Ungoliant was there. And so
okay.
So while they're all distracted up north trying to find out where he is, he's secretly plotting with Ungoliant in the south of Valinor. He's literally in their house and they don't even realize it.
So that passage goes through Ungoliant spinning her webs and through a pocket of void so nobody could see her. So not shadow, not anything, just
like there's just nothingness. That's interesting that there's a creature out there that's so dark it just creates nothingness. It's not even darkness.
Yeah, but she's spooky.
If you go to that map of the first so that first image I sent you on Discord.
I'm not going to open it because people were telling me there was some internet issues and I have no idea what's going on. I have like a Ethernet connection plugged in and I think I just had too many tabs open maybe, and so I won't pull it up again, but I'll definitely look that.
But you see all the different mountain ranges and all that stuff on there, and it goes through and talks about how she goes through the mountain ranges to go up and to be able to assail the dwelling of the Valar. So she's not quite in Valinor. She is in the south of the world, but she's not that far from them. She's in the mountain ranges by them. So,
So once they do that, like he gets her together, and she's kind of like allowing them to travel without being noticed. And Ungoliant, like she sucks up light, and that's kind of how he gets her to go along. He's like promises her, like, just work with me, and you'll get everything you want. But do you think he's going to keep his word? Yeah, no. And so they end up assailing Valinor, and they attack the trees. And she drinks up all the light of the trees. And there was a reservoir too of the dew from these trees that they kept, and she drank all of the light there. And that was just a huge, huge, huge thing for the Valar. They're like, who would even do this? It's just like so awful. And it did seem really interesting to me in this part, because I was like, that's interesting that there's like levels of evil here. And this was something I thought of when we were talking about Shelob, like when we did the book club stream. And I know like there are people that didn't agree with me on this, but like it does seem that like these Ungoliant creatures and the Shelob, like kind of spider creatures, it's like it's a different kind of evil. And I don't know if it's like naturalistic. It's like primeval maybe.
Well, the evil of the monsters that are roaming the world at this point in time are the evils that have been brought about because of Melkor's devising and corrupting and perverting of the plan. So it's not it's I think it's intentionally left blank as to the
What
exact
it is.
nature of Ungoliant, but it's clear that it's not an external Cthulhian entity type of thing coming in. It's an evil that has been introduced into the world because of Melkor's perverting.
Yeah, because he did
of-
like create
right?
that. Like he went through and found things
So-
like in the beginning part, and he was corrupting them and creating
He-
minions for himself,
He,
right?
So
he,
it's
he
either
created Mount Doom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's either Ungoliant was a Maiar who followed Melkor and became a twisted version of what she was supposed to be, or it was an entity like the Balrogs, right? The Balrogs are
Yeah.
Maiar who followed Melkor.
Yeah,
But the fact
definitely.
that she's not directly aligned with Melkor suggests to me that she's potentially a Maiar who saw Melkor's rebellion and thought, "Yeah, I want to have my own."
Yeah,
power.
she wanted it for herself, and then
And-
it is interesting. Oh, go ahead.
And I'll tell you what, I don't think there's a scarier creature in Tolkien's world than Ungoliant.
Yeah, she's
I
terrible.
know.
I mean,
The
that
creepy
is-
thing about it is that, like, okay, he created this thing, so it's sort of like telling about how you create something that's evil. It's going
Right.
to get away from you, and he talks like they eat the lights, and then like later on, like he goes to attack like Feanor and Finwë, and he kills Feanor's dad and steals the Silmarils because he wants the light, and then he's trying to hide it from Ungoliant as they're running around.
Mhm.
And then Ungoliant is like, dude, bitch, give me that shit.
Dude,
Like,
it's-
And by the
You
I
you
love the
just
quote.
scared.
Yeah,
Like you just scared the
scaring
ultimate
Melkor
evil in the world.
yeah. I love it too. Like how is it Tolkien describes her? Oh yeah, she had grown so huge from feasting that even Morgoth
Yeah.
was
Yes.
afraid. Like
Yeah, and
It's-
she's just eating light, like eating it, and then he
Yeah.
gets like it gets so bad he has to call up the freaking Balrogs to protect him, which I
Yeah.
thought was hilarious. And
But-
then they chase her off, and then the creepiest thing though is what happens to her, and it's just she doesn't just do anything. It's like her appetite is so strong that she ends up eating herself.
yeah.
Maybe.
Well,
Maybe.
That's what
This
people
is
think
gross.
happened to her.
yes. Nobody
Well,
really
uh,
knows. She might still be out there. We don't.
There's-
Yeah, we don't know, but that's
Th-
what
there's-
they say what happened to her, and frankly, I think that's I'll leave it there because that's just freaking scary.
Oh,
There's a really interesting thing to consider, I think, going to another author with Robert Jordan, in how he created two little things that kind of almost possibly have a nod to Ungoliant in that unknown created evil type of thing with Makin Shin and Shatterlogoth.
Yeah,
You know,
those two
and
things.
this whole,
yes,
you know,
yes.
those
I
two
was gonna
things
say that.
in Wheel of Time
Yeah.
frighten the piss out of anybody if you actually sit there and delve into the
Mhm.
thought a bit. Ungoliant is the encapsulation of both of those things in my mind.
Yeah, that's really
real
interesting.
quick, because I believe it was the brothers Arda in chat who was saying that she wasn't in Valinor. And I just wanted to double check this to make sure that I wasn't mistaking anything. So I grabbed my trusty atlas here, and so I'm looking at it right now. There's south of Manwë's throne is the pastures of Yavanna and the woods of Arome, and southeast of the woods of Arome, literally right next door, is Ungoliant's lair.
Oh, okay.
It's I could take a picture if you like, but
Yeah,
Is it
I
in
can't.
the
I don't
She's-
want to like
picture?
mess up the stream
if,
again.
if
So
it, oh no, that's fine. But if you're looking at Valinor as kind of like a continent, she is there. Just
okay.
it's I think it's a mixture of because of the unlight that she has, like her devouring of light and always living, out of sight, out of mind. They didn't even know that she existed. So
Yeah.
So she's
she was
in the mountain ranges.
she was the perfect ally for Morgoth at the perfect time.
Yeah, but then that like all evil things, like their own desires and his inability to keep his word, just kind of destroyed it, because evil cannot create; it can only destroy.
Destroy. Yep.
And evil is always the facilitating of its own demise.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it definitely has its seeds of its own demise there. So after the attack on Valinor, it leads the Valar and the Eldar to sort of have a council of what to do. And because of the things that Melkor said, like Feanor wants to go out, obviously. Well, he wants to get revenge and stuff like that. And it's interesting because, like, I think they talk about how, okay, the Valar had never kept the Eldar in, like, Valinor. They're always like, okay, you're free to leave. And it's interesting because when people talk about wanting to leave finally, and they're trying to go in with the lies of Melkor about, they said we couldn't leave, so we need to leave. We need to free ourselves. And I thought that was really interesting because, like, freedom is obviously a very, like, powerful, important, like, motivation. And it's something that they want, but it's like they were always free and they just didn't realize it. And I think it's really interesting in this part that, like, the Valar could have told them that, like, you guys could have always left, but they chose not to. And I thought that was very significant. What do you guys think of that part?
Yeah, well, it's the reason why the Eldar journeyed to Valinor was because of the message brought back by Finwë, Olwë, and
oh yeah, I'm like forgetting parts of
boy,
this. Sorry,
yeah.
guys.
other fellow, right? I'm blanking on his name at the moment. But they came back with the message of what that place was like, and they had a desire in them to go. And along the way, you end up hearing about all these different groups that break off because of their desire for something else. And so now they've gotten there. And it's been over like 3,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that initial desire that is kind of lost in the, and it's a new generation as well that has come up only knowing this. And so they've, a new desire has sprung up in the population. And they don't, that new generation doesn't remember the original desire.
Yeah. Yeah, and then this is where the part 2, where they realize they've destroyed these trees, and the trees, like the stars and the Silmarils, were something that was a once in a lifetime creation. Or, like, you could even say the birth of Feanor. That was one thing I was realizing when they were talking about these things, is that there's one act of creation that you could do in your life, and that's sort of like your magnum opus. Like, thinking of Charlotte's Web here, like she does the big web. It's like, I don't know why that made me think of that, maybe with Ungoliant and stuff, but it was like your life's work, and that's where you put all your energy in, and you don't have more for that. And that's when they end up asking, like, Feanor, can you bring the Silmarils back so we could fix the trees? And that is interesting that you said, Feanor, earlier, that he sees, like, all of the Valar as one thing. And I think that is like a good point to say, because we kind of forget that the, like, Valar and the Eldar are, like, different, and there's, like, a hierarchy there. And he's like, you know what, I don't think I'm going to do this, and that's a bad idea, because he ends up just taking it, and his father dies, and that just throws, like, Feanor off the edge of the cliff. So, like, you want to tell us about that part, Feanor?
Yeah. So there is a quote. Let me pull it out. Let me find it right here. Try and find it here. It's a quote from one of the Valar, talking about how, or not from one of the Valar. Sorry, it's just a quote from the book itself. Who among the Eldar has loved their father more, essentially, than Feanor? So he goes, and he's already incredibly mad about having the Silmarils taken. His dad died, and he he gathers his sons and makes a very, very famous oath.
Oh yes, that was a great like. Where did I say that?
To Eru Ilúvatar, and something you find out by reading Tolkien is oaths and curses are incredibly powerful. Let me read this because it's really crazy. It's like they swore an oath which none shall break, and none should take by the name even of Ilúvatar, calling the everlasting dark upon them if they kept it not. And when Manwë they named and witnessed, and Varda and the hallowed mountains of Tenequatil, vowing to pursue with vengeance and hatred to the ends of the world Vala, demon, elf, or man as yet unborn, or any creature great or small, good or evil, that time should bring forth into the end of days, whoso should hold or take or keep a Silmaril from their possession. Yeah.
Awesome.
So literally, Eru, damn us all to oblivion if we don't get our Silmarils back from anybody. And that was a really bad idea.
Yeah.
That was awful. But so they make the oath. It's Feanor, his 7 sons. Now, something interesting, it's not really talked about in the Silmarillion, but his youngest sons, Amrod and Amras.
Yeah.
Their mother, Nerdnell, begs Feanor, because they're the 2 youngest, because he's already planning, I'm going to set off from Middle-earth, I'm going to kill Morgoth, we're going to take the Silmarils back. Their mother begs him to let the 2 youngest stay. Like, don't drag them out in this mission, just at least let them 2 stay. Don't make them a part of this. And Feanor essentially calls her a ungrateful, a terrible wife, this, that, and the other, and takes the 2 boys anyway. And in one version of the Flight of the Noldor, when they eventually do get to Middle-earth, one of those 2, I believe it was Amrod, ends up getting killed when Feanor burns the ships.
Yeah.
Because Feanor doesn't realize he's still on the boats.
Oh yeah, should we get to that part? Because like I know it's getting kind of late, but
we skipped over the kinslaying.
We got to get to the kinslaying.
Yes, we got to get to the kinslaying. So like Feanor is super mad, and he finally just gets everyone all hyped up and like, come on, like, because he has no chill, and he just doubles down on the stuff that Melkor was telling to him, even though he knows Melkor was saying it and it might not have been true. Like, he goes hard on it, and he gets a whole bunch of the Noldor to go with him, and they're like, we're going to hunt down Melkor and get rid of him once and for all. And so they set out to war, and nobody's done that before. And let me see if I'm remembering this correctly. Where do they go? I'm really confused because my map is so bad.
To the Tellery.
Yeah, so they go to the Tellery, and they need the ships to go like follow Melkor. And yeah, you want to tell us about the kinslaying?
Well, okay. So here's the thing, right? From a reader's perspective, right? So the Tellery say our ships are like the jewels of the Noldor. They're extremely precious to us.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm one of the Noldor, if I'm Feanor, I'm not seeing the issue with y'all sailing me across the seas and then sailing back. All you guys got to do is just drop me off. It's like a taxi, like just leave me there. You guys can keep your ships. I'm not damaging your ships. I just need a ride. So from a reader's perspective, I'm thinking, okay, they're asking the Noldor to be cautious and wait it out and see. And of course, Feanor absolutely does not have the mindset.
Has no chill.
If I recall, Fingolfin and Feanor both at some point think that the Teleri were told to halt the progress of the Noldor by the Valar. Going back to what you were talking about earlier with the freedom to leave.
Yeah. So they could very well see that as like, what, they're not letting us leave. They're not letting us do that. So
they're trying to stop our progress.
Yeah.
And so, Feanor, he takes it upon himself to be like, all right, listen, we got to take these boats. Okay. So we're just going to sneak in there. We're just going to steal the boats and we're going to take off. And it was the Teleri. Teleri drew first blood. Okay. They drew first blood, not the Noldor. The Noldor were just, they're
like, we're just going to appropriate this, reparations. Come on, you guys, give us your boats.
the Noldor were seizing the means of naval transportation, and the Teleri were not having any of that. And once the Noldor started getting thrown overboard into the sea was when all the violence kicked off.
Oh, okay. It was the defenestration of the Noldor that led to the ship burning and the massacre.
Yeah, the massacre at the harbor there, and what was I gonna say is Fingolfin comes upon it and thinks that
It's
thinks the
Fingolfin's
Teleri.
son, Fingol.
Fingol,
Was it
yeah.
no? Well, no.
Was it?
I
Yeah,
thought
because
no. Fingolfin, his host came there and thought, "Oh crap, Feanor
it's
was under attack."
Fingolfin's son is leading the vanguard of Fingolfin's troops and sees what's going on and just immediately assumes that the Teleri are the perpetrators of the violence, and so goes into attack.
Yep.
But there is a line from Olwe that I absolutely love. And so Olwe answers Feanor, "We renounce no friendship, but it may be the part of a friend to rebuke a friend's folly. And when the Noldor welcomed us and gave us aid, otherwise than you spoke, in the land of Aemon, we were to dwell forever, as brothers whose houses stand side by side." So that line from Olwe, that beginning bit, like, you know, to drop the levels of intellectualism a huge amount, we can go to Rowling with what's his name, the bad wizard guy who's in the first, not the bad wizard, the poor wizard who can't perform magic. What's his name? Neville.
Oh.
Neville. Oh, okay.
Neville, who stands up to resist Ron, Harry, and Hermione leaving. Right, like,
yeah.
Sometimes a friend means opposing your friends, right? It's not a real friendship, because at that point you don't have the best intents for your friend at heart.
And the thing about that conversation between Feanor and Olwe is that they both actually make very valid points. You have Olwe who's saying, "Listen, I'm not saying I'm not your friend anymore. I'm just saying you're being a dumbass and you need to stop." But at the same time, Feanor, what prompted that response was Feanor saying, "Look, dude, you guys had no problem taking in the Noldor as people to help build your harbors and, erect all these towers and great stoneworks for you. Why can't you give us a hand with this?" And it's both. It's easy to empathize with both points of view, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
You can empathize with both of them in their conversation, albeit Olwe was correct.
I mean, I always wondered too. It's like, if this thing happening so distressed the Valar, it's like, why didn't they themselves take care of Melkor? I don't know.
That is I can actually explain this. So, because of how destructive their previous wars had been against Melkor, and the fact that the firstborn were awakened now and living.
Oh yeah, you're right.
They didn't want to end up breaking the world again with the firstborn still residing in Middle Earth.
Yes, I totally, that's a great point. I totally forgot about that point, is that they'd already, because like you said about the first thing that you missed is that, this was a war of attrition, and I totally feel that. So I wanted to read this, this sort of thing that the Teleri say to the Noldor, because it's such a great curse. It says, "Ye have spilled the blood of your kindred unrighteously, and have stained the land of Aman. For blood ye shall render blood, and beyond Aman you shall dwell in death's shadow. For though Eri will pointing you not to die in Ea, and no sickness may assail you, yet slain ye may be, unslain ye shall be, by weapon and by torment and by grief, and your houseless spirit shall come then to Mandos. There long ere shall you bide, and yearn for your bodies, and find little pity through all ye have slain should entreat for you. And those that endure in Middle Earth and come not to Mandos shall grow weary of the world, as with great burden, and yet shall wane, and become a shadows of regret before the younger race that cometh after. The Valar hath spoken."
Yeah, that's
Mandos.
Potentially Mandos.
Yeah, Mandos saying that. Yeah, I'm
the first bit of that you left out though as well. The tears unnumbered ye shall shed, and the Valar will fence Valinor against you and shut you out, so that not even the echo of your lamentation shall pass over the mountain. On the house of Feanor, the wrath of the Valar lieth from the west unto the uttermost east, and upon all that will follow them it shall be laid also. Their oath shall drive them, and yet betray them, and ever snatch away the very treasures that they have sworn to pursue. To evil end shall all things turn that they begin well, and by treason of kin unto kin, and the fear of treason shall this come to pass. The dispossessed shall they be forever.
Like, y'all just got kicked out of paradise. Thanks for playing.
Yeah. And and the thing is, I love Feanor's response because he pretty much says YOLO. He goes, "We have sworn. We have sworn and not lightly. This oath we will keep. We are threatened with many evils, and treason not least. But one thing is not said, that we shall suffer from cowardice, from cravens, or the fear of cravens. Therefore I say we will go on. In this doom I add, the deeds that we shall do shall be the matter of song until the last days of Arda."
Yeah, and
Yeah. There's a lot of live by the sword, die by the sword with this, and never and that curse, the dispossessed they shall be forever. It's like, you can go, you're never getting your shit back.
yeah.
Well, that's the thing, though, is when you get into Lord of the Rings, especially when you follow the story of Galadriel, who in this leaves not because she wants to follow the Oath of Feanor, but because she has a desire to rule in her heart. She has a desire to rule her own kingdom. That's why she leaves. But she is allowed to return to Valinor. And all the elves who left are allowed to return to Valinor because mercy is always present in Eru Ilúvatar's mind. But they had to learn a lesson, right?
Right. Which is why the friendship was never renounced, despite Feanor's thoughts on it.
Yeah, that is really interesting. So after the kinslaying, like, they take the ships, and I think they head up north, and they end up like hitting like an ice wall. And I think they land, and they're like, we can't keep going. There's too much. They lost a bunch of ship. A bunch of elves died in the sea, and I think they had to cross some more of the sea, and they thought, hey, we could go across the ice, but that's too treacherous. And then they're like, no, we're going to go on the sea. And then half of the group doesn't want to go, and that's the group that like Galadriel's in and everything. And so like Feanor's like, fuck it, like, we're going to leave you, and we're just going to go by ourselves. And so he does that. And then he arrives on the shores, and he's like, you know what, we're not coming back. And he burns the ships.
Actually, that brings me to one of my favorite quotes.
Read it.
So, but when they had landed, Mithros, the eldest of his sons, and on a time the friend of Fingon ere Morgoth's lies came between, spoke to Feanor, saying, "Now what ships and rowers will you spare to return, and whom shall they bear hither first? Fingon the valiant?" Then Feanor laughed as one Fey, and he cried, "None and none. What I left behind I count now no loss. Needless baggage on the road it is proved. Let those that cursed my name curse me still, and wind their way back to the cages of the Valar. Let the ships burn."
I like him because he is a man of his word. Like, he picks a lane and he stays in it, and he just like hits send. He's going 100. Like, yeah. I mean, it's really awesome. Like, in a way, it's very epic too, and it's sort of like the burning of the ships. And this is something that is like repeated in other stories. Like, if you're reading the Game of Thrones, like the what are they called? The Rhoynish people and Queen Nymeria, and the sinking of the like 1,000 ships that she has when they reach Dorne and they're not going back. It's a great way to say, like, that's it, line in the sand, we're going forward, and there's no worry, like, there's no turning back.
Yeah. Well, there's the several moments in our history of people burning ships to say, no, we're pressing on. Like Cortez, I think it was, in the New World. Just, no, we're not going back. We are here to see it out to the very bitter end.
And then
definitely.
Fingolfin realizes he's betrayed when he sees the ships being turned into kindling off in the distance. And I'm of the theory, had Feanor been alive when Fingolfin finally crossed and they met up again, Fingolfin probably would have killed Feanor for doing that.
Probably.
At that point, yeah.
Yeah, I think he would have been like, the hell with the oath, I swore I'm going to kill this dude. Like, that's probably what's going on.
Yeah, and the interesting part here, and I know I haven't really talked about Galadriel because there's just there's mentions of her, and it does say that she was curious, but there's just so much to cover, and it is kind of getting like long in the stream. But it does say this last paragraph here is that their host actually crossed the like wastelands of the north, so they went through the ice and stuff like that, and there were no dick daggers involved, and no one was jumping on like cave trolls and none of that retardation. So
you can see how the Amazon people used Feanor's story for Galadriel.
Yes, definitely.
Like they took all the there's a tempest within me, like there's a fire burning in Feanor.
Yeah, that's really true. Now that you mention it, and I understand what happened in this is like they totally like trying to make her Feanor, which is like no, like
defeats the entire purpose.
Like, yeah,
it does.
It's like soy Feanor. That's what Galadriel is.
She's not nearly as smart, but we're not going to talk about garbage. But
bring no report to darken the light of day. Yeah.
Yes, but so that ends ends our arc, sort of like chapter 9, and ends chapter 9, and then we're going to talk about like this. I think for next week we're going to do of the Sindar to the ruins of Beleriand. And what are your like any final thoughts about this, like, guys?
Dude, but just continually seeing the setup of all the stuff in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and these continual running themes of evil setting up its own downfall.
Yes, I love
the
that.
idea
That's so fun.
Of knowledge for the sake of knowledge versus knowledge for the sake of gain, and the idea of being a steward of the earth as opposed to being a dominator of the earth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like these are just themes that you'll just see running throughout continually, and so keeping an eye on those as we go forward.
That's awesome.
What you find out very early, and you see it especially in the chapters we've just gone over, is that the Silmarillion opens itself up to the reader as to questions of what if. So I talked about this briefly on Twitter, but like in Feanor's case, what if the Teleri had said, yeah, you know what, we're going to let you use the boats. We'll sail you over there. How different would Middle Earth have looked? Would Feanor have, and the rest of the Noldor defeated Melkor or Morgoth? Or
what if Valor would have told the Eldar, like in Feanor and stuff, that they were always free to leave? I always that was one thing I always asked, because they mentioned it several times, is that they said nothing. They didn't want to say anything. They didn't want to get involved.
Yeah. Well, that's also the love of the Valar for the Eldar. It's they wanted to keep them safe. They wanted to, it's that sort of love of the parent towards the child in a lot of ways. And people can make a lot of mistakes by not in the name of good, right? Or what people think is good.
It's kind of like the Auli and Yavanna chapter with the dwarves.
Yeah. I love how, we've gone through 11 chapters of this book, and good stories build on themselves.
They really do.
And when you sit there and you read this, unlike other prequels for other books that are out there, you can read this and you can tell this was really kind of the basis for what Tolkien wrote later, and how the history builds and enriches a reread in those other books, in the Hobbit, in the Lord of the Rings. You have all of this stuff being the underpinning for that whole story, and how that history just kind of makes Lord of the Rings just feel richer and decadent as you go through on a reread. And that's that's one of the purposes that I quickly discovered the first time I read this book, that I'm rediscovering again as I'm looking through this. It is just an absolute gem that is going to cause me in my future reads of the other books so much more enjoyment.
Oh
It's a
yeah,
really
Especially as
definitely.
we discuss this.
Yeah.
I gotta say that's for me. Like, it's been so cool reading this and seeing the parallels and the stories. Like, reading like about like, oh, that's where the Ints came from and why they were made. The whole thing with the dwarves, like the collection, like the connections to other things Tolkien wrote, like the Christmas stories and
with the Ents in particular. It really lets you. It gives you a more deeper appreciation of Treebeard's rage and anger at Saruman, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just all that sort of stuff, setting up the depth of it. I'm sorry, I'm rambling, and I started.
It's okay. I know. I would love to go on, but I do need to go rescue my boyfriend in a little bit. So, do you guys have anything coming up, Nathan?
Just the unhype and post-mortem of the Wheel of Prime bullshit.
Yes, this Thursday
I think
going to be hosting that on the White Cloaks, and me
Yeah.
and Alex will be setting it up. Me and Alex are also going to keep showing it on the Discord, so that'll be also on this Thursday.
And then I'll have my episode 5 review out on my channel.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so behind on that with this show
as-
and like my gardening master classes, because I'm going to be like Tom Barbadil like at the end of 2 months. Like, it's been really crazy.
The lesson for that Lady B is real life over Wheel of Prime. It is.
Oh yeah, I mean the
so
gardening program is so cool, and I really like knowing this stuff. I feel like, I mean, I do like, I go out and vibe with my trees, but I have plants here and I've had a garden, and it is, I do take a lot of love from the reverence that Tolkien had for nature and the characters and the caretakers of nature that he has, because I think they're so cool. But anyway, do you have anything else, Nathan?
No, that's all I've got going on. So.
Okay, anything else, Gadfly, coming up for you?
I actually do have something. I've got an article that I'll be, today I'll be updating my blog to kind of say what I'm doing with that going forward. And either Tuesday or Wednesday, I'm going to be uploading an article on language and fictional languages in fantasy.
Oh, that's so
fiction.
cool. I'm really excited to read that.
And just how an author can make them feel real as opposed to just, like a new vocabulary.
Yeah, I love that. Feanor, you have anything coming up?
Yeah, I have a couple of things. I have a potential live stream in the next couple of weeks with one of the members of the White Cloaks. No spoilers, but no, I can't tell. I can't spoil it, but see me
Is
on
it the
there.
book stream one?
No, Chilporial.
Oh, okay, yeah. Brian is so
Oh,
great. I do like. I
nice.
didn't see him today, but I know Brian really well. In fact, I just got the glass that I won on his last chill stream, so I'm really excited. I'll have to take a picture of that, but you'll have a great time.
And also, I have a project that's probably gonna take me, honestly, like roughly 9 to 10 months to complete.
Yeah,
But
you told me about that, and that's gonna be so cool.
What I'm doing is it's a follow-up to my first video, where I'm actually going to be going to various different locations. It's going to be like a 2-week long road trip where I go to various different locations where I would film to show where I would film different scenes of my hypothetical Tolkien TV show.
Mm-hmm.
And as a part of that, I'm also going to be writing the entire screenplay for it as well.
Nice.
So, yeah, it's going to be cool. So, but yeah, that's going to, and obviously there's going to be little videos in between, just obviously talking crap about Rings of Prime, and if any breaking news comes out about them killing another horse or something like that,
Like,
Rest in
it's
peace,
really,
Pips.
it's really fortunate for them that Pips is on the other side of the world, because you don't just go and hurt our horses. So
right, absolutely. But no, there'll just be little videos in between. But yeah, that's pretty much what I got going on right now.
Oh, that's awesome. So I'm going to be working on my episode 3 review of Wheel of Prime. I have like a funny video I might make. It's just gonna be some very like low effort about something funny I found on Tumblr. I'm still working on my alt tech exclusive, but because of my life got a lot more like hectic, I still have to edit that together. And unfortunately that takes some time, but hopefully that'll be out in the next couple of weeks. So
Very cool.
yeah, so thank you guys all for watching. I'm going to, if I remember how to do this, brand, I'm going to play our outro, and we'll see you guys again in 2 weeks. And thank you all so much for coming out. Chat has been wonderful. We're an engaging group of people, and thank you all for the wonderful discussions that we've had. And thank you guys for correcting me and explaining stuff to me that I didn't know. I am very grateful for you, all of them, all the people out there and on Twitter. Like I started talking to Twitter, like I started talking to Feanor because I was asking what I should read about that. And I know Matt is out there, the dad that shouldn't be, like he's been really helpful too. And brothers Arda and Enid too. Thank you so much. Everyone else that was out here, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you so much. Awesome. Did I do it on here? I just want to make sure this closes on here. I think I might have ended it too soon.
Nope, still live.
Yeah, it's still going. Let me see.
Here, I'll do my obligatory Ty-Shar Manetheren so everybody can hear that.
No, it's still going. I ended the thing. I just wanted to make sure it ended on like the
Yep.
How is it still on? Like it is end stream.